Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. We talk about the problems people face in their day to day lives. Let's start with the video. If someone were to describe me, I'm pretty sure the words revengeful and vindictive wouldn't be their choices. But that doesn't mean that if someone gives me crap, I'm going to turn the other cheek. Too bad for my stepbrother because he found this the hard way. I was really hoping to avoid going to extremes, but he pushed all of my wrong buttons, and I just had to teach him what it's like to mess with me. And now he's begging me for mercy. He's asking me to help him out, and I do feel a little bit swayed by him. So I'll tell my story here and ask you guys if I should help him or not. Is he an a hole who doesn't deserve my sympathies, or am I being too harsh on him? So, about half a year ago, I came to live with my brother. I wasn't really keen on staying with him, but I had to stay in Iowa for a year to work on a project with a joint company that merged with ours. It was going to be hard to fly in and out every month or so, and that's why the EO of my team sent me down there for a whole year until everything was settled. But the house my brother used to live in was a shabby, dingy fry nut that isn't able to pass even as a hut. So I proposed a deal to him. I told him I'd buy a house for him, but he'll have to take care of all the chores. I already knew how tiring it's going to be to work through a merger as an accountant, and cooking, cleaning, or grocery shopping was going to be something I'd drag my foot on. And I love my stepbrother, so I actually wanted him to live in a decent house instead of that slum he called a house. And that's how I ended up buying a house for him. It's been 6 months since then, and I still have another 6 months before the terms of my new contract are up. I was letting loose and settling down when suddenly my stepbrother told me he needed to talk to me about something. I asked him what was up and why does he look like someone stole his candy. He got angry and asked me not to make jokes as he had something serious to say. He told me that recently him and his girlfriend have decided to live together. It's a pretty big step for them because they both are very private people and love their personal space. His girlfriend owns a one-bedroom house, which would make things uncomfortable for them in the long run if they ever just need to escape for a bit or take a breather when things are getting too overwhelming. They have decided that it would be better for her to move in with him. I said that I'm happy for them and that I'll make sure to not bother them. But he said that's not why he was telling me. He wanted me to move out of the house and find someplace else for the rest of the time I'm in Iowa. I was actually getting upset at this suggestion of his because it would waste a lot of my time if I moved. But I controlled myself and asked him if I could move into his girlfriend's house instead of wasting days in finding a rental home. But he instantly denied this. He said that his girlfriend isn't going to move out or sell the house. She was going to keep it as a second place, and she doesn't like strangers coming to her place, let alone someone living there. At this point, I couldn't control myself anymore. They wanted to move in and live together. It was their problem, and I was getting dragged around when I barely had time to get a day off and just sleep and relax. And to think he's kicking me out of my own house? I reminded him that I was the one who bought this house for him, and if he needs to live with his girlfriend, then he's welcome to buy a new one. But all he said was that he'll be forced to evict me, and I should just leave on my own accord. Hearing that threat sent me over the edge. I just laughed at him because my stepbrother was threatening to kick me out of the house I bought if I don't comply with him, when he's the one who had been doing illegal business thinking that I don't know about it all. I told him he should not mess with me, as I'm well aware of how he operates his e-commerce website and where all the products he sells there come from. I showed him the pictures I took when I found out he was selling knockoffs of popular brands and told him not to mess with me. I walked out of the room and went to sleep that night. The next day, when I came back from work, I was shocked to find that all my stuff was already packed. I asked my stepbrother why he was being so pushy and not learning what it means to mess with me. He said that the house was in his name and I don't have an agreement notice to live in this house. He said if I don't leave, he'll take legal action. He told me he saw the pictures that I had and they do not prove that his business is illegal. I can't harm him, and I should just leave before this gets ugly. I hit my breaking point then. I grabbed my suitcase and walked out the door. I looked for a motel nearby and booked a room for a week there. Then I went straight to the cops and told them how my brother was running an illegal business and how he copies the designs of famous brands, makes a few changes in them, and then sells them online. I reported him for copyright infringement. I don't know what happened after that as I wasn't keeping tabs on my stepbrother, but about a week later, my brother came to my office. I had ignored a few of his calls before, but I didn't think he'd show up to my work. I asked him what he wanted, and he said he just needed to talk. I took him outside under the pretense of getting lunch. When we were a safe distance away from my workplace, I told him to get away from me and not bother me again. But suddenly, he started apologizing. He kept saying how sorry he was for behaving like the way he did, and I should take my complaint back. He started begging me on his knees, saying all sorts of things about how if this goes to court, he could be ruined and he'd lose everything he had ever worked for. I was so embarrassed that I told him I'd think about it and give him a call later. I just wanted him to leave before anyone saw that embarrassing state. Now I'm back at my motel. I don't know if I should help him out or not. As I'm a witness who heard about his shady deals with clients, I do hold some power in the case. But should I really take pity on him? Am I being an a-hole right now and overreacting over something that could have been sorted out easily? Or does he deserve to reap what he sowed? I just spent a whole evening going through all the replies on my original post. After reading them all, I've come to the conclusion that I should at least talk to my stepbrother once more before pitying him. Many of you did think that what I did was wrong and I should have handled matters in a way where no permanent damage would be caused, but I disagree with that. I think he needed a firm reminder of what happens when you kick out a family. But either way, I'll talk to him tomorrow and then we'll decide what I should do. As I said, I met with my brother. I wanted to see if he was really sorry for what he did and if his regret was genuine about how things turned out to be. After a lengthy talk, I found out that he really had hit a rock bottom. His whole business and everything he owns is on the line if the case goes to court and the companies are involved. Also, his girlfriend had apparently broken off their relationship, saying that she can't be with someone who would scam his way around and bring this much attention to their lives. Actually, I'm not sorry to see the girl go, but I do feel bad about how he was going to lose his whole life, so I've decided to talk to the cops and get them to drop the case. It's been a year since my last update here. I did try to get the cops to drop the case after I withdrew my charges, but they told me that it is not how copyright infringement works. They have already informed the brands that were harmed in this process, and now it's between them and my stepbrother. When I told my stepbrother about this, he almost lost his composure, but I told him that whatever happens, I do feel bad and I'll try to help him the best I could. After a few months and a lot of meetings with the representatives of all the brands involved, we were able to come to a settlement. My brother was to pay $2 million each to all the brands that he sold the knockoffs of. Other than that, he had to compensate them for the sales he had made based on their design and turnover, all his profits for his business. He lost his house and his other assets in the process. Because he had nowhere else to go, he came back home with me and is now living in my house. He found a decent paying job at a car seller company and is now working there until he restarts his own business. I had to lend him about $600,000 for him to completely pay off all his debts and start fresh. Hopefully, this time, he wouldn't push my buttons like last time, and I wouldn't have to take such extreme steps. NTA, I don't think you're an a-hole for leaving him to his own karma. Personally, I don't give a shit if billionaire brands were robbed off of a few bucks, but still, he deserves to suffer for hurting small businesses that had to struggle because some cheap knockoff was more cost friendly for them. YTA, who sells out his own brother just because they kicked them out of the house? You could have tried to talk to both him and his girlfriend and come to some kind of arrangement. And if it was not possible, you shouldn't have bought him the house in the first place. That was stupid to begin with. I'm a 45-year-old female, and my mother, 76, is a very simple person. My father abandoned us when the youngest was 6 months old, and my mother was never the same mentally. I have a good financial condition. I try to help as much as I can with the groceries, bills, but it is very complicated because my mother refuses to come live with me and remains in the terrible house that my father gave her in the divorce. My brother, my sister in law, and their three children, 13 male, 9 male, and 5 female, live in the house at the back. And the house was tiny with a big yard. My brother built his house in the back and made the house even smaller. And he uses my mom as a free babysitter to take care of the kids he had, not to mention the dogs he adopted and never paid for their food. And several times their children go to eat at my mother's house. Keep in mind that my mother receives a low salary in retirement that is only really enough for her to support herself. I've been saving money for more than a decade to buy her a house, and I finally got it. It is a simple house with a one bedroom, bath, with a big yard, with a garden, perfect for her. I talked to her and she agreed with me that it would be better for the house to be in my name because I know my brothers and what they are capable of at any given opportunity. But it would have a lifetime clause for her only. I warned her that I didn't want my brother to move with her, but in return, she wouldn't have to worry about bills and food anymore as I would help. She looked relieved. I told my brother at her request, she was next to me, and he said it would be difficult to accommodate everyone, but that eventually he would help expand the house to house everyone. I saw the despair on my mother's face, so I just made it very clear that the house was for my mother and not for them. He started to say yes, but he could help with the bills or food, and that his and his mother's house was too bad for a family of 5. I said no. The mother accepted the gift knowing that he wouldn't live there, and that due to their history, I wouldn't trust him to pay the bills. He doesn't pay my mother, and I wouldn't be paying for 5 people. He started calling me selfish and that it was an a-hole to give a gift on condition, knowing how bad my mom's house is and that she obviously has no other option to accept. He said I was purposely harming him and posing as a monster. He is not. My mom is more relieved to get out of the house, but my brothers are calling me an a-hole even more because the house is in my name. AITA? NTA. However, if you haven't already, you should consider consulting an attorney to have a plan to enforce keeping your brother out of your mother's house. I should say your house, because you're the owner, fortunately. That way, if he tries to step over the line and invade her space, your property, you can take action. And make sure you let him know you have consulted a lawyer and there will be consequences if he does anything improper. If they are not going to properly take care of your mother and you are the one footing the bill to do so, then you have every right to protect her and yourself. This is exactly what your stipulations are for, not for anything malicious. Freeloaders and gaslighters are the best at turning good deeds into harmful and manipulative actions because it doesn't suit them. If they have a problem with supporting themselves, it's time for them to figure it out. They've gotten 2 decades of extra help under their belt. You don't owe them anything. I, female 27, work for a company based in London. It's an American company, so we often get some Americans who come in and work with us for a few months at a time. They typically work a lot, but I'm not sure whether they're required to or it's something they do willingly. Regardless, my contract is for a full-time position of 35 hours, and I very rarely do overtime. 35 hours is considered full time, and obviously I get the standard things such as annual leave, etc. My annual leave is coming up next week, and I will be gone for a whole month as I'm going traveling. During lunch break, I was sitting on the roof. We have benches and tables on the roof that can be used as a kind of cafeteria when the weather is nice, with a few other coworkers. One of the American coworkers, Annie, comes and joins us. Annie rarely takes her full breaks, which are 1 hour. She typically eats quickly and goes back to work. I was telling another coworker how I am knackered and next week can't come soon enough. Annie told me that I should stop complaining because I'm barely working and that teenagers in Texas work more than my part time hours. I told her that it's a full time position and I'm working enough. She told me that less than 50 to 60 hours is part time, especially when I'm going off for a month to do God knows what, and that I should grow up and take up more responsibility and start working like an adult. I tried to explain to her that 35 hours, it's 8 hours every day, but 1 hour is for lunch, so it doesn't count as working hours, is considered full time here, and taking my holidays is my right. She said that I don't have to take it and I'm just lazy and should focus more on the company's well being than my own. She's not my boss, we're peers. I told her that if she's willing to work so much, she can do it, but to stop judging others. She kept going on about how I wasted my time getting masters and have only been working for a short amount of time, and it's childish to expect people to cater to me and my lack of work ethic. I'm not proud of it, but I have had enough of her for judging me for perfectly normal work hours. I told her to F off and that misery loves company, but to look for company elsewhere. She got all huffy, called me some names, and threatened to go to HR. My friend told me that she understands why I did it, but perhaps I should have been more understanding as Annie is from a different work culture, and I could have explained it to her again. I feel bad for telling her to F off, but I tried my best to explain things to her. Was I really the a-hole here? NTA. Sure, you should be understanding of a different work culture, but so should she. Sounds like she was digging into you for zero reason. For the record, full time in the States is 40 hours. There is a culture here, US, that working extra hours is demonstrative of a greater commitment to the job, being a better professional, but that view is hardly universal and, in my view, is waning. Your coworker is an AH. Go enjoy your vacation. NTA. Some of us Americans have the work attitude that Annie does, but it's decreasing as the younger generations take over. It's true that many work 50 to 60 hours and are proud of it, but it doesn't make it right for everyone. I too make a strong boundary between work and home life. I'm glad you stood your ground. She doesn't need to be shaming you like that. If you hadn't said anything, she'd continue to hold this imaginary badge of honor over you. Your other coworker said you could have been nicer, but in my experience, there are times to lay down the law, even if it ruffles some feathers. This feels like one of those. NTA. As an American, I would like to point out that people like Annie are why the term ugly American was invented. Annie just showed you the effects of 4 decades of anti worker propaganda in the US. Many American workers have a sort of collective Stockholm syndrome, where no matter how low the wages are and how few benefits, and no matter how many insane hours people work, or even have to work 2 jobs to barely get by, a large number of them insist it's just normal and everyone should do it. I once worked with someone who literally had the same experiences as the Joad family in the novel The Grapes of Wrath. She lived on a farm in Oklahoma in the 1930s, which was lost to foreclosure and the Dust Bowl. Her family came to California and worked in the fields. They were taken advantage of in every possible way by the people they worked for. As a result, she would defend any employer who took advantage of her. One time I suggested that she speak to an attorney to find out her rights. She wouldn't do that because I wouldn't want to be unfair to the company. She was so brainwashed that she believed she had no right to get legal advice. I suggest if Annie harasses you any further, you speak to HR about it.